In the Texas Capitol, Jasmine Crockett stood face to face with Greg Abbott, challenging him over the state's most extreme abortion laws. He mocked her until she revealed damning documents, proof of rising deaths and hidden warnings. The hearing turned into a battlefield, the crowd erupting as Abbott's silence stretched past 30 unbearable seconds. Power collapsed, truth stood tall. What revelation could bring a governor to his knees before the entire nation? Stay with us. This is a story worth every second of your time. The chamber was packed tight, the air heavy with anticipation. Reporters leaned in, cameras clicked without pause, and even the walls seemed to vibrate with tension. Everyone knew this wasn't routine politics. This was a collision waiting to happen. Greg Abbott strode in like he owned the building, his smirk sharp, his eyes cold as they swept over Jasmine Crockett with open disdain. He dropped into his chair, slammed his palm against the table, and sneered, "I don't have time today to hear a child pretend to understand Texas law." The words hit like a slap, deliberate and cruel. His supporters erupted in laughter, harsh and mocking, filling the chamber with ugly echoes. Abbott basked in it, tapping the table with smug satisfaction, certain he had already won. But Jasmine sat unmoving, her gaze fixed on him like steel. One hand rested calmly on the thick folder before her, silent, steady, and dangerous. Her stillness spoke louder than his insults. The storm was coming, and she was ready. The echo of laughter was still hanging in the rafters when Greg Abbott leaned forward, seizing the moment like a predator ready to strike. The lights above cut sharp angles across his face, throwing just enough shadow to make his smirk look carved from stone. He didn't yell. He didn't need to. His voice was calm, cold, and edged with arrogance. "This isn't some cheap courtroom where you play dress-up, Congresswoman. This is Texas. Here, we write the laws. You're just here chasing the spotlight." Every word landed like a slap, meant to humiliate her, not debate her. And he delivered it like he'd been waiting all week to say it. The sting of his insult had barely settled before he shifted tone, slipping into his next act like a well-rehearsed performer. He squared his shoulders, sat taller in his chair, and turned to the room as if giving a State of the Union address. "We've built a culture of life here in Texas," he declared, his voice rising just enough to fill the chamber without strain. "Our laws reflect the values of Texans, protecting the unborn, supporting mothers, defending families." Then, with an almost smug theatricality, he pulled out a glossy sheet from his folder, charts and bullet points printed in bold font, carefully curated. He held it up like a trophy and tapped the top of the page. Since implementing Senate Bill 8, Texas has seen an increase in birth rates, a reduction in abortions, and record levels of adoption assistance applications. These are not just numbers, these are lives. The applause from his side of the chamber hit like a wall, loud, immediate, aggressive. Supporters nodded proudly, some pounding their palms together, others standing half out of their seats, feeding off his momentum. Abbott didn't blink. He soaked in the noise, eyes gleaming. While others argue, we act. While others fear backlash, we stand firm in our convictions. Texas leads the nation. To him, this was the knockout blow. The crowd was roaring. Cameras were flashing. On the surface, it looked like dominance. But across the table, Jasmine Crockett didn't move an inch. She didn't blink, didn't flinch. Her eyes were locked on him, steady, unmoved by the numbers or the noise. One hand rested calmly on the thick folder in front of her, fingertips grazing the edge. Not to open it yet, but as a warning. Her silence wasn't weakness. It was tension, precision, a blade waiting for the right moment to cut. And as Abbott soaked in his own echo chamber, Jasmine slowly lifted her chin. The smile that touched her lips was slight, sharp, and cold. She didn't interrupt. She didn't challenge. She simply watched. Let him build his house of numbers, brick by polished brick, because she knew what was coming next would shatter every wall he thought protected him. Her stillness said it all. He was talking, but he had no idea how close he was to the edge. The applause might have belonged to him, but the silence belonged to her. But while Abbott basked in applause and paper-thin praise, Jasmine was already reaching for something heavier, something numbers couldn't spin and pride couldn't shield against. She stood slowly, but the silence that followed felt instant and absolute. No rustle, no cough, not even a breath. Jasmine Crockett didn't need to raise her voice. Her presence did the shouting for her. Eyes locked on Abbott, she spoke with a sharp, measured tone that sliced through the tension like steel through silk. You say Texas supports women? Then explain why the maternal mortality rate has increased by 34% since the day you signed that law. The chamber jolted. Heads turned. Fingers paused above keyboards. It wasn't just a question. It was an ambush. The words didn't echo. They stabbed. And before the room could recover, Jasmine reached down and lifted a thick, tabbed report into view. Not a prop, not a political stunt. This was the official, unfiltered data from Abbott's own government. The state seal glared beneath the chamber lights, unforgiving and real. She held it like a mirror. This is from your own Department of State Health Services. Her tone didn't tremble. Her hands didn't shake. This was a scalpel in a surgeon's grip, and Abbott was the subject on the table. He leaned back with a smirk, but it wasn't confidence. It was reflex. His eyes darted sideways for the briefest moment before landing back on her, with condescension sharpened like a blade. You don't understand how to read numbers. Don't embarrass yourself playing with statistics you clearly don't get. The words were louder than they needed to be. A few chuckles rose from his camp, half-hearted, almost nervous. He tried to laugh her off, tried to reclaim the stage, but something in the room had shifted. Jasmine didn't blink. She didn't need to. The report was still raised, her grip firm, her voice even firmer. This is your administration's report, Governor. Are you denying your own office's data now? The impact was instant, audible, palpable. A wave of uncertainty rolled through the gallery. Phones stopped recording for show and started recording for evidence. Reporters leaned forward, breath caught. All eyes turned to Abbott, and for the first time that day the mask slipped. His smirk faltered, just for a second, but the cameras caught it. A muscle near his eye twitched. His lips parted slightly, then pressed back together. No words came. No laughter followed. Just a cold, stalling silence that wrapped around the room like a vice. And Jasmine? She stood still. She didn't press further. She didn't need to. The silence was doing it for her. The crowd had felt the shift. The cameras had captured it. And Abbott, once smug, now stiff, was no longer holding court. He was holding on. This was the first crack, and everyone saw it. The chamber was still holding its breath from the blow she'd just delivered. Yet Jasmine wasn't done. Not even close. She moved again, not with fury, but with precision. The next cut was already in her hand. She reached calmly for another document in her folder, this one marked with red tabs and hospital system logos. No hesitation, no flourish. She held it up, eyes steady, and said flatly, "Emergency pregnancy-related complications have surged by 67% across Texas hospitals since your law went into effect." The words didn't need volume. They were bullets dressed as facts, fired one by one. No one in the room moved. Some looked around, confused. Others just froze, trying to process what they'd heard. Jasmine didn't pause. Her tone sharpened as she stepped closer to the mic, her voice cold and deliberate. Do you know how many doctors have left this state because they're terrified of being sued? You've turned them into hostages of your law. The line struck hard. It wasn't just an accusation. It was a diagnosis. She wasn't debating policy anymore. She was pointing to casualties. Across the room, Greg Abbott flushed deep red. His hands clenched into fists, and without warning, he slammed one onto the table. The sound cracked through the chamber like a warning shot. His voice came next, loud, dismissive, laced with anger and condescension. You're just a failed attorney putting on a political show for the cameras. The people of Texas stand with me, not you. The words spilled fast like someone trying to plug a hole mid-collapse. A few of his supporters clapped, but it was scattered, weak, the energy in the room already draining away from him. Jasmine didn't flinch. Her expression didn't even shift. She let the insult sit, then walked right through it. Her voice came low and razor-sharp. Which people, Governor? The room fell quiet again, dead still. She didn't blink. Maria Santos? Forced to carry a pregnancy she knew would end in pain, only to hold her child for minutes before death? The silence thickened. Or Sarah Williams, 16 years old, a victim, forced to travel 800 miles to reclaim her right to choose what happens to her body. Each word landed with the weight of lived pain, not hypothetical, not political, real, raw, documented. The chamber broke open. Audible gasps rang out. A woman in the gallery stood, hands clasped over her mouth. Some shifted uncomfortably, others leaned forward, stunned. Reporters scrambled to capture every second, cameras flashing like lightning strikes. Every click marked a shift in the room's temperature. Abbott was no longer driving anything. He sat stiff, gripping the edge of the desk so tight his knuckles turned pale. His smirk was gone. His composure cracked. Jasmine didn't yell. She didn't raise her hand. But she had pulled the thread that unraveled the entire facade, and everyone in that room felt it snap. The gallery was still buzzing from Jasmine's last blow, but she wasn't done. She wasn't just speaking now. She was about to prove everything. She reached down, pulled out a thick folder, and laid it on the table with quiet finality. The red label across the front said one word in bold black letters: confidential. The moment it touched the table, the air in the chamber changed. Jasmine didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her calm was more terrifying than a shout. She looked directly at Greg Abbott, her tone steady and cutting. "These are internal emails from your office, Governor, dated just weeks before your law took effect." Abbott froze. His shoulders stayed upright, but something in his eyes flickered. Jasmine opened the folder and turned the first page with surgical control. She began to read aloud, slow and deliberate, like every word was a nail. "The governor is concerned maternal mortality may spike significantly post-enactment." The room stirred. It was subtle at first, shifting chairs, sideways glances. But everyone was listening now. She continued without flinching. "Hospitals warn of capacity overflow. Physicians express legal risk concerns and possible service withdrawal." That sentence cracked the silence wide open. A low gasp swept across the room. Someone near the back whispered, "Oh my God!" Not as a reaction, but as a realization. This wasn't politics. This was real. And Jasmine wasn't done. Then came the line that ripped the lid off the chamber. Jasmine paused, lifted her eyes from the page, and then delivered it clearly and coldly. "Proceed as planned. Health outcomes can be managed after the midterms." The reaction was instant. Gasps, shouts, reporters jumping to their feet. Camera flashes exploded like fireworks. A woman in the gallery covered her mouth. Another stood up. The sound of chairs scraping the floor echoed through the chaos. Greg Abbott didn't speak. Not at first. His mouth opened slightly, but the words wouldn't come. His face turned pale, a sheen of sweat forming at his hairline. His hand went to the mic, but his grip trembled. And then finally the words slipped out. Quiet, shaky, stripped of confidence. "Those emails, well, they're out of context." Jasmine didn't blink. She didn't soften. Her voice dropped lower, but it landed harder. "Out of context? You told your staff to ignore the danger because it didn't fit your election schedule. You put politics above the lives of Texas women. That's not out of context, Governor. That's your signature." Her words were fire, and the silence that followed was louder than any outburst. Abbott sat motionless, shoulders hunched, hands gripping the edge of the table like a man holding on to what little power he had left. His eyes were wide but unfocused. He wasn't leading this hearing anymore. He was surviving it. And in that moment, everyone watching knew. Jasmine hadn't just confronted him. She had cornered him. The chamber was already cracked wide open. But Jasmine wasn't finished. What she reached for next wasn't just another report. It was a truth so precise, so personal, it didn't need volume to destroy him. With a slow, deliberate motion, Jasmine pulled out one final document, sealed inside a clear plastic sleeve with a faded hospital logo still visible. It came from a whistleblower inside St. Augustine Memorial, the same hospital that had submitted repeated warnings to Abbott's office but received no reply. This wasn't just policy, it was consequence. Jasmine held the folder with both hands like it was radioactive. No tabs, no charts, just one medical record, and it shook the air heavier than any stack of laws. She didn't look at the cameras. She didn't look at the crowd. Her eyes were locked on Greg Abbott, and her voice dropped to a blade-thin whisper that still reached every corner of the room. This is a medical record of a woman who nearly died during a miscarriage. The doctors knew what to do, but they were too afraid to act without first checking with a lawyer. The words landed like iron. Every heartbeat in the chamber seemed to stop at once. There was no outrage, no disbelief, just frozen attention. Jasmine let the moment stretch, her silence loud. Then she looked up from the page and met Abbott's gaze directly. And when she spoke again, her words struck like lightning through a dry field. Her name was Jennifer Abbott. It hit like a car crash. The governor's last ounce of color vanished. Cameras captured the exact second his pupils shrank and his throat locked up. This wasn't a name in a file. This wasn't someone abstract. This was a woman from Texas, his state, his policies, and now unmistakably someone who shared his name. His jaw clenched, but no words came out. He looked down, then back up, then nowhere. And in that instant, the illusion of control disintegrated. Jasmine stood motionless, her tone harder, sharper. She could be your daughter, your sister, your wife, and your policies put Jennifer Abbott's life and the lives of thousands of women across Texas on the line for politics. The sentence wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was surgical, precise, devastating. Then came the ripples, a gasp, a choked sob. Someone near the press row muttered, "Oh my God!" Fingers trembled on keyboard keys that didn't move. Every face turned toward Abbott, but his gaze had nowhere to go. His hands rested limp, his breathing shallow. For 30 unbearable seconds he sat there, silent, powerless, and utterly broken. And in those 30 seconds, Jasmine Crockett didn't just expose hypocrisy. She broke the armor of a man who thought he was untouchable. The echo of Jennifer Abbott's name still hung in the air like a ghost no one could ignore. And in that haunting silence, the weight of everything Jasmine had revealed came crashing down on Greg Abbott like a collapsing building. Greg Abbott no longer looked like a governor. He looked like a man who had been hollowed out from the inside. His hands, once animated and firm, now trembled as they gripped the edge of the table. Knuckles white, skin pale. The sweat on his forehead wasn't from the heat. It was from the realization that the armor of power he had worn for decades had cracked, and there was nothing underneath. His eyes darted across the room, searching for an exit, a lifeline, even a distraction, anything to stop the freefall he had been thrown into. Across from him, Jasmine Crockett didn't need to raise her voice. She didn't need to say another word. Her presence was enough now. She stood firm, tall, and calm. Not with arrogance, but with the quiet gravity of someone who had just placed a mirror in front of a system that hated being seen. She gently stacked the last set of documents in front of her, each paper sliding into place like a closing argument that didn't need to be spoken out loud. Her calmness wasn't silence. It was dominance. The cameras didn't miss a thing. Every news outlet, every live stream, every viewer at home witnessed the visual split screen of a nation's reckoning. On one side, Greg Abbott, shoulders collapsed, hands shaking, the weight of his policies pressing down like a vice. On the other, Jasmine Crockett, spine straight, voice steady, her very stillness louder than any speech he had given. It was a portrait of power being ripped away and truth taking its place. Abbott's lips parted, but nothing came out. He blinked, swallowed hard, shifted in his seat, yet the words refused to surface. There was no room for spin, no space left for deflection. His political instincts had carried him through countless crises, but now they had nothing left to cling to. What had once been a game of control had turned into a courtroom without a judge. Just one woman, one truth, and one man unable to breathe under the weight of both. Inside the GOP, the fallout was immediate and messy. Aides scrambled to contain the narrative, but there was no putting the genie back. Some party members refused to speak on camera. Others tiptoed around Abbott's name, calling it unfortunate optics or a moment of misjudgment. But behind closed doors, it was panic. A leaked email from a Texas campaign strategist read, "He should have walked out before she dropped the folder." Donors backed away. Several longtime allies ghosted him overnight. One senator was overheard whispering, "He's dead weight now." By contrast, the Democratic camp erupted like it was Super Bowl Sunday. Jasmine wasn't just applauded, she was anointed. Overnight, talk shows lit up with her name. The new face of justice, one host called her. Political blogs ran think pieces titled, "Jasmine Crockett Just Redefined Congressional Power." Volunteers signed up in droves. Local leaders in blue districts cited her as a model for standing up to systemic abuse. One commentator said it best, "She didn't destroy Abbott. He imploded the second he realized she was prepared." The most telling sign wasn't just the cheers, it was the shift in language. People stopped talking about Abbott's policies and started talking about his silence. They weren't quoting his speeches, they were quoting Jasmine's. "She could be your daughter, your sister, your wife." That sentence alone showed up in protest marches, in murals, and classrooms. College students put it on posters. Activists spray-painted it on walls. Survivors of abuse repeated it in interviews. Her words had crossed out of politics and into people's lives. While the nation replayed Abbott's downfall in slow motion, the true weight of what had happened began to settle, not just on Washington, but on the hearts of millions watching from home. This wasn't just another hearing gone viral. This was something raw, something real, something too human to reduce to headlines or hashtags. The clip of Abbott frozen in silence, and Jasmine standing tall, with nothing but truth in her hands, had become more than content. It had become a statement. People didn't see a politician defeating a governor. They saw a daughter standing up for those who never had a voice in that room. They saw courage break through cynicism. They saw someone finally say what they had been screaming at their TV screens for years, but had no microphone to deliver. This story wasn't about red or blue anymore. It wasn't even about Abbott. It was about a system that too often crushed the powerless and protected the powerful. It was about every child who cried alone in a shelter, every family shattered by policy decisions made by men who never had to feel the consequences. It was about every time the law had been used not as a shield, but as a weapon. And on that day, Jasmine had thrown that weapon back at its wielder, with precision, without violence, without fear. Because in that room, it was never just paper she carried. It was names, faces, people, evidence of pain made invisible for too long. And she didn't raise her voice, but her presence roared louder than any gavel. Jasmine didn't fight with insults or slogans. She fought with facts, with files, with relentless preparation. She didn't come to play politics. She came to speak for the people who had no seat at that table. And the moment she did, everything shifted. As one commentator later said, this wasn't a hearing, it was a mirror. And every member of Congress, every viewer, had to look into it. Because what Jasmine laid bare wasn't just Abbott's hypocrisy, it was the price of indifference. The hearing room became a battlefield, not of guns or chaos, but of truth and legacy, of what we allow ourselves to ignore, and what happens when someone refuses to let it stay ignored. The lesson hit like a punch to the chest. In a world where lies often travel faster than facts, Jasmine proved something radical, that being prepared still matters, that doing the work, digging into the details, showing up armed with evidence, it still has the power to shatter arrogance. Her calm dismantled his fury. Her silence between statements said more than 1,000 political speeches. And when Abbott had nothing left to say, it wasn't because she shouted him down. It was because the truth made his lies collapse on their own. In that moment, Jasmine didn't just win a debate. She revealed a pattern. She unmasked a system, and she gave people something they didn't know they were waiting for. Hope wrapped in clarity. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't rehearsed, it was just real. And in today's America, that's the rarest kind of power. She stood as proof that courage isn't loud, it's consistent, that justice isn't a concept, it's a fight. That power only matters when it protects the powerless, not when it hides behind privilege. Jasmine didn't need to say it out loud. Her actions screamed it. This isn't about me, it's about every child Abbott forgot. And her message, clear, sharp, impossible to ignore, began to echo beyond the walls of that room. It reached college campuses and courtrooms. It found its way into sermons, classrooms, podcasts. People weren't just quoting Jasmine. They were questioning everything around them. Laws, decisions, who gets protected, who gets silenced, and why. One line in particular was played again and again like a call to arms. The law only has meaning when it protects people. If it kills hope, it will be destroyed by truth. It wasn't just a sentence, it was a warning, a prophecy, a challenge, because too many had forgotten what the law was supposed to do. Too many had accepted that cruelty was part of governance, that indifference was just part of the job. But Jasmine stood in that room and reminded everyone that laws are not sacred, lives are. And when those laws forget that, they lose the very soul that justifies their existence. Reporters later asked her if she felt proud of what she'd done. She didn't give a soundbite. She didn't gloat. She said simply, "I did my job. I told the truth." That should never be extraordinary. But in a political world flooded with spin, that quiet integrity echoed like a drumbeat in the chest of a country desperate for something different. Behind every headline and soundbite, there was something more sacred growing, an awakening. People were beginning to realize they didn't have to accept the performance of power anymore. They didn't have to sit silently while cruelty dressed itself in policy. Jasmine had shown them that one person, armed with truth, discipline, and heart, could flip the entire room, could make the monster flinch, could make injustice blink first. And that was the real story. Not just what Abbott lost, but what Jasmine gave back to the people watching, a reason to believe again. But if that moment taught us anything, it's this. Truth alone is never enough. It has to be backed by action, by people who refuse to stay quiet when it counts. We watched Jasmine Crockett stand alone, armed only with facts and fire, and silence a man backed by power, money, and politics. But what happens next isn't up to her. It's up to us. If you felt something watching that hearing, if you clenched your fists or wiped away a tear, don't let that feeling fade. Channel it, carry it, use it. Because the people in that room aren't the only ones responsible for what happens next. We are. Ask yourself, what kind of world are we leaving behind if we let policies destroy hope without consequence? If we let cruelty get reelected while compassion gets shouted down? This isn't just about Texas. This is about every state, every law, every forgotten face buried under red tape. And if you're waiting for someone else to fix it, stop. You are someone. Call your representatives. Show up to local hearings. Vote like lives depend on it, because they do. Speak up when it's uncomfortable. Stand beside those who've been told to sit down, because silence doesn't protect the weak. It only protects the powerful. And the longer we stay silent, the more children like the one Jasmine defended will be left behind. This is not the end of the story. This is where we enter it. And history, real, raw, unfinished history, is asking us one question: will you just watch, or will you rise? Thank you for watching until this moment and for standing with us on this journey for justice. Your support means everything. Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss what's next. And we'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below and let us know what moved you most in this story. Together, our voices make a difference.